Why do you think veterans don't talk about mental health as often?
Well, it really, I mean, there's a couple different factors. For one thing, a lot of the ones who are talking to me for the first time are older veterans
Mhm.
and, Vietnam era, even, a little bit later, a little bit earlier. And that just was mental health was not something that was addressed. Even if it was addressed, it was not in society at large. A lot of times these veterans are coming from families or beliefs where it's like you're a man and you got to stand up, like, and you're just going to take it, and you're the stress, like, that's normal, you just deal with it. um, Similarly, even for younger veterans, like, it's the military, like there is a culture of toughness essentially. So a lot of times people are afraid to speak up about it during service. Um, they don't want to get like a mark on their record
Mhm.
or be discharged. And then there's also veterans from all walks of life who have their trauma that they suffered was military sexual trauma,
Mhm.
which comes with its own set of like shame and guilt and feelings that a lot of people just aren't equipped to handle. So I really do take it as an honor that people share their stories with me, and I try to take what I know to help them, like, which is navigate the VA system.
Mhm. So, what would you say to someone who hasn't yet filed a mental health claim? Like, what are some tips that you think would help them in that process?
So it depends on what your exact condition is. PTSD is, of course, the most common one that when you hear military mental health, you think PTSD, which is very common. But there's also depression, anxiety, bipolar, a great number of conditions. With PTSD in particular, in order to get service connected, you have to have a corroborated in service stressor. So, if someone is filing for PTSD for the first time, I really suggest that they um, have their stressor. It's got to be something that happened in service. They identify that stressor for the VA, and if it's not noted in their service records, for example, if it's combat and there's no indication that there was the veteran had like a combat badge or anything, you can get statements. You can get service records showing certain deployments. Whatever you do, just do, if you're filing for PTSD, make sure that you have someone else or another piece of evidence to help support your claim, because if you don't have that, VA will just deny PTSD outright. It's got to be a corroborated stressor. However, that doesn't mean that you can't get service connection, even if it does stem from a traumatic event in service. Basically, what you need to do is show that you didn't have any of these mental health symptoms going into service, you were accepted into service, and then something happened during service. Either there's a record of it or it's not. But a lot of times, when there's not records, for example, incidents that happened during basic training, I've heard a lot of injuries and mishaps and accidents that happen during basic training. VA, like, the government's not going to write that down. They're not going to take a recording of that. But if you can have someone who knew you before service provide a lay statement, essentially saying, I knew this veteran, this is how they were outgoing, they played sports, we were friendly, we talked a lot. And then after service, they just seemed to change. They were more withdrawn, seemed angry, didn't want to, isolated themselves.
Mhm.
So a supporting statement like that, even though it's not showing what happened in service, it's still showing that there was a change before and after service. So even if you don't have records of any mental health like diagnosis during service, lay statements can help a lot. People who observed you and know you and can talk to your symptoms, speak about your symptoms.
So, essentially, if you are filing, you want to know what your stressor is. And if you don't have a way of noting what your stressor is, have someone who can speak to the fact that you were different, where when you came in, things changed in service, and now you're different than when you came in.
Exactly. It doesn't always have to be a specific event either, a stressor. If you're not claiming PTSD, a lot of people have onset of bipolar disorder during service, or even schizophrenia occurs during service. If something started, a disease process begins during service, you should be service connected for it. So I would just make sure, note, like, you're not limited just because if you don't have a stressor or you're not able to get that corroborated. There are other ways to prove service connection.
Now, I've actually talked with a bunch of veterans, and a lot of times I hear them say things like, "I'm not missing a limb, so I don't need to be service connected," or "I'm not as bad as someone else, so I don't need to take from the system." What would you say to someone with a response like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do hear that sometimes. Or I didn't get deployed. I got injured like during training, or I was on base and I got injured. And to that, I say, first of all, it's your claim. So do whatever you want. You don't have to file if you don't want to. But do consider that, essentially there was a contract between you and the government. When you sign up, when you get drafted, when you enlist, whenever you sign that paperwork, you're saying to the government, like my body, my mind, like everything. I'm in your service for the next however many years, and I'll do whatever necessary. And in return, the government says, okay, well, if anything happens to you, we'll take care of you. We'll make sure that you're covered. You get if you can't work, we'll take care of you. And it doesn't happen like that. Uh, it doesn't happen like that automatically.
No.
So I just to a veteran who thinks they don't have a need as severe as another one, that may be true, but it's not like there's a certain limit of veterans. Like there's not a certain severity you have to have of a disability. Any disability that you have, it's fair game. Like if you got that during service, the contract that you signed says that the VA is going to take care of you. So I feel very strongly about that.
Yeah, yeah, totally see that. If you want to see more videos, just go ahead and click the playlist that is right next to this, or the link in the description if you want to read an article about PTSD. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, thank you for your service.